Once I arrive at the farm, I'm basically looking at potential contamination from inside the farm. So that is if they're using incorrect inputs. Potential contamination from the neighbors or from outside the farm. And this can be from a conventional neighbor, it can be from industrial waste, it can be from a road which has been sprayed with herbicide, it can be from a lot of different things. And this is a very important aspect that usually the grower is very aware of. And oftentimes they will pick the farm site ahead of time with this in mind, that they have to protect the integrity of the organic farming. My role as an inspector is to observe and record what's taking place on the farm and to assess that against the Canadian standard. I don't tell the farmer how to bring their farm into conformity. I just observe, record, and assess it against the standard. Before coming to the farm, I receive the file from the certifying body, and the file typically includes last year's report, their application for renewal, and any comments from the certifying body, and if there's any outstanding conditions. I'm basically looking at 4 aspects. The first one is interviews, where we talk about what you do, what you don't do, what you avoid, what works, what doesn't work, all of that kind of stuff. The second aspect is observations. So I will observe your buffer zones. I do a perimeter walk usually. I go into all your buildings and look at that. If you have chickens, then I take measurements and I just look at the runs you have. Is there still forage for the animals? Is the land degraded? Is it still in good shape? Do you have different pens so you can move them around? Go into the greenhouse, look at your potting soil. We look at your equipment to see if there's oil dripping, if there's any contamination risk from that. Into your, wherever you keep your inputs, so we look at if you're using some pesticides or fertilizers or whatever. Third thing I look at is what are they actually producing? Are they producing eggs or greenhouse plants or field crops or milk, or what are they producing? Fourth thing is, what do they do with it? Are they selling to a local farmer's market? Do they ship it across the country? And their method of sales. And so that gives me a complete picture of the farm. When I go to a farm with a greenhouse, the first thing I do is to determine whether the greenhouse is used just for starts, for seedlings and bedding plants, or whether it's used for that plus produce that's grown later on. And it's just basically like another crops farm, but it's inside. So the same issues are relevant in the greenhouse as are outside the greenhouse. What is the soil that they're growing in that case? Because often it's a constructed potting mix. So the ingredients for the potting mix, some people make their own, some people buy it all. It's sort of everything in between. If they have disease problems inside the greenhouse, how do they address those? Farms with livestock operations are quite a bit more complex than crops inspections because it's always combined with a crop inspection. With the animals, there's a few categories of things that I look at. There's the source of the livestock, the living conditions. There is the feed that they use. Where does it come from? Is it organic? There's the healthcare issues. When they have a health issue with an animal, how do they handle that? And then there's the products that they produce. If it's a poultry operation, if it's layers, how do they handle the eggs? Where do they sell them? If it's broiler operation, who does the slaughtering? Is the slaughter facility either certified in its own right, or do they have a third-party attestation of compliance? And so there's a lot of issues that are not there in crops. So the records that I'm interested in when I come onto a farm are a very important aspect of the inspection, especially inputs. What input records do they have? What did they add and when did they add it and how much did they use? what's their crop rotation plan. I look at the records, what was planted in the field last year, what was planted this year. I look at records of harvest. I look at records for input. Planting records are important. Obviously for perennials like orchards or grapes, that's not an issue unless they're putting in new nursery stock. And then I look at the harvest records, and then post-harvest treatments. If they're taking their produce to a farmer's market, are they washing the products? Where does the water come from? And what records do they have in terms of its potability? After that, I look at the sales record. And then in the in-out balance audit, I balance the harvest record with the sales record. I confirm that the production is reasonable for the land base from figures that I have obtained from either horticultural experts or from the BC Ministry of Agriculture. The single most helpful preparation that a farmer can do is to assemble their documents. Oftentimes, something that's forgotten is documentation around manure or compost. The lack of documentation, it doesn't necessarily mean that the grower is doing something wrong. It just means that it's difficult to verify their practices.
I definitely feel that the inspection is a significant part of the certification process, because the inspectors, when they come to check your farm and you see how thorough they are, you know that they're doing that at every other farm as well. It gives a confidence in the certification process.